Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Why We Huddle. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we're going to take a trip to West Lafayette, Indiana, and we're going to learn a lot about Purdue. Hello, everybody, and hey, Chris, thank you for joining us tonight on Why We Huddle. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm not too bad. How are yourself?
I'm doing well.
Good.
So, of course, today we're focusing on your school, Purdue. You are part of the Boiler Express podcast.
Yep.
So I'll be honest, I don't know as an SEC guy too much about Purdue. So I look forward to learning whatever you can tell us about the school.
Yeah, it's a big engineering school in middle of cornfield of Indiana, and it's got a lot of like a lot of those small town roots. Are the city that encompasses Purdue is only about 50,000 people, so it's super like close knit community. Super, everybody kind of knows each other. It's big enough to know a lot of people without feeling like you know everybody. So it's a nice little area. Campus is red brick for every building that you can see, and it's pretty gorgeous in the fall.
Nice. That sounds a lot. Well, outside of the cornfields, actually sounds quite a bit like Gainesville, or at least
Yeah.
how Gainesville used to be a not super big city. And you're
Mhm.
talking red bricks. I mean, the
Yeah.
red brick Gothic style is definitely
Yeah.
how UF is. So the Boilermakers.
Mhm.
What exactly is a Boilermaker for those of us not in the know?
It's a maker of boilers that you would have like in the in trains or in the basements of buildings and things like that. I don't remember the specifics of the way it came out, but Purdue played Wabash College in football. I want to say in like 1911 or 1912, and the headline because they beat them like 72 to nothing or something, and the headline was the big burly Boilermakers beat Wabash or something along those lines. So the name kind of just stuck from there. But our actual mascot is a train. Purdue Pete, who's the big guy running around, he's kind of like our secondary mascot. So we kind of are a little unique and have two different types of mascots.
Oh, and yeah, I mean, it's one thing for a school like Mississippi State, who we just had on to have their live mascot and, of course,
Yeah,
their fur mascots, but having two completely different. That's
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
definitely,
Pete's the hype, but the train is the staple.
and you may or may not know the answer to this, but you brought a Wabash.
Mhm.
Is that the same Wabash that the Wabash Cannonball that Kansas State has that tradition
I
that they do named after?
Ironically not. It is a small, all boys, college about 30 minutes south of West Lafayette. They play I wanna say they're NAIA or Division II or something like that. They're a much smaller school, but back, 100 years ago, everybody was kinda playing everybody and went through it like that.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of reminds me how Sewanee was a member of the SEC
Uh-huh.
when it first started, and
Yeah.
now,
Yeah. Yeah.
not many people
Well,
can find them.
yeah, the University of Chicago was a charter member of the Big Ten up until
Yep.
1945, I think. I like histories and dates, so I usually spit out a bunch of stuff like that.
Oh, trust me, I'm the same way down south in many
Uh,
ways.
yep.
So, for Purdue, and again,
Mhm.
as someone not in the know, what are some of your rivals?
So we have 3, official rivals that we play for, trophies. So the big one is IU, the team in Bloomington. We play for the Old Oak and Bucket. It's a old oak bucket that's got chain links for each team that's won. So the chain is 112 long or something like that. But it's got a P or an I depending on who won that year. Um, so that's actually kind of cool. Um,
Real
the next one is Illinois. They play for the Cannon. So it's honestly just a little thing like this with a little cannon on top, and they've been playing for that for quite a while too. I don't remember how long, but not as much as IU, but it's been around forever. And then the other one that's kind of been on again, off again, but my entire time growing up, and it was always a game I look forward to, was the game against Notre Dame because we play for the Shillelagh Trophy. And I mean, Notre Dame has held that trophy more times than not, but it's still always a super fun atmosphere, especially because I think this year is at Ross-Ade Stadium, and that's always a night game. I think actually this year might be an afternoon game, but I can't remember. Regardless, stadium's always hyped up. Notre Dame won't recognize it as a rivalry because it's Notre Dame, but we do, and it's a pretty good time.
All right, now I've got to ask because you have multiple trophies. Like, what are the origins of those trophies? Like, what makes
Oh,
the old Oaken bucket? What makes that become a trophy for a college football rivalry? If you know.
so it was first awarded in 1925, but I think it was just at the time, they just wanted to have a traveling trophy of some type, and for some reason, it was decided to use that. Actually, I think a little bit of it is that the old Oaken bucket was kind of like a typical Hoosier thing at that time. Like Hoosier is in like Indiana residents, not IU. So they just decided to use that and put chain links on it, and it's stuck around ever since.
Hmm.
Yeah,
All right.
it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned Ross-Ade Stadium.
Mhm.
What's a typical game day like there in West Lafayette?
So Ross-Ade Stadium is, I think after the new renovations, it's about 61 or 62,000, maybe 65. I can't remember. It's a single level stadium, but it's a lot to me. It's a lot like Mackey. It's very close and tight knit. It's a horseshoe shape, but they actually just closed in the south end zone. So now all of our student section is back there and went through a big $45 million renovation. It's got the biggest jumbotron, I think HDR jumbotron in the country, which I think is kind of a cool thing to brag about. But no, it's a lot of tailgates, and most of the tailgating areas are within walking distance. So we have Ackerman Golf Course that's just to the west of the stadium. So everybody parks up there, has a good time, cooks, and it's a lot of fun because you're in the middle of the city, but it doesn't feel like you're in the middle of the city.
Okay. Uh, nice. Now,
Yep.
during game day, okay, you're in the
Mhm,
stadium.
mhm.
What are some traditions to look out for if I make a trip up there?
Um, so the marching band's pretty big at Purdue. They've got the world's largest drum. I mean, at the time it was world largest drum. It's not largest drum anymore. But it's that's kind of a big thing. A lot of people dislike shout. So between third and fourth quarter, we sing shout as kind of like a hype up thing. So like big former players will come back and like lead the crowd and shout and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting. We've actually added in a player tunnel on the north side of the stadium that's actually underneath some of the stands. So now the Boilermaker special goes up on top of there and parks inside the stadium, and the team runs out from underneath the tunnel. So that's actually pretty cool.
Nice. And what
Yep.
is the Boilermaker special?
That's the train. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Hey, I figured, but you know what? Hey,
Right. You
I
know what
don't
they
want to
say
make
about
assumptions.
assuming.
Yes, I'm going to be like, oh, that must be the train. And
Yeah.
then it's like, no, no, here we got this little super golf cart like some
Yeah.
other schools
That's
have.
the extra special. It's a mini train that they can actually take on the field without putting ruts into it.
There you go. Uh,
We got a lot. Engineering
oh,
school, we're always trying to build stuff.
hey, gotta find different ways to stand out, especially
Exactly.
in today's day and age.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm assuming shout. It's the same shout I'm thinking
Yep.
of from
Yep.
Animal
Animal
House.
House. Yep.
Yep. All
Yep.
righty.
Same one that Oregon does. There's a couple other schools that do it. Our fan base, it is a hotly contested debate as to should we keep it or not. But I think it's been around at this point for so long, it's going to be impossible to take away because you're going to upset one fan base or the other, or one side of the fan base or the other.
Now, which side are you, if I may ask?
I'm on the side of keeping it because I don't like change.
Well,
But honestly, I think like when it's on a good night, like the Penn State game when Purdue opened up against Penn State a couple years ago, that was the best I'd ever seen it. The whole stadium was going nuts. Like it's a lot of fun. But also when you're down, like to Ohio State, I think the year before we were down like 35 points and trying to get people amped up with shout is just kind of a dead nail. So it's a little difficult.
now, for sure. Now, I can say from our side, Florida plays "Won't Back Down" by Tom Petty after the
Yeah.
third quarter, as well as we have a tradition that's gone on for years called "We Are the Boys."
Mhm.
As I've pointed out to people before, it's this blue one. But anyways, and of course, and we added Tom Petty several years ago
Mhm.
when he passed. But yes, if we're in a nice tight game,
Yeah.
that hits one way.
Mhm.
It's still great if we're losing, but it's not the same
It's different.
feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can totally
Yeah.
understand when you have hosted teams like Ohio State and it's not going well, I can completely see where that's
Yeah.
where that's going.
Like,
Having been in games where I've watched Florida get blown out at home,
yeah. It's
I
just it's flatline. You're like, "Oh my goodness."
yeah. Nah, with that said, that's still got to be something cool for the culture. What do the people
Mhm.
say that want to get rid of it? What do they have a replacement idea, or let's just
So
not do anything?
so some of it is like some of them wanna put like Mo Bamba in between the 3rd and 4th quarter, which is a hip hop song from a few years ago. I'm like, "Yeah, it's not really age appropriate." That's kind of my opinion. There's some other things I've heard, like, I have heard, Back in Black or something like that in the 3rd quarter, which would be cool, given we're black and gold. But it's one of those where, like, a lot of people want it gone, not a lot of people have an idea of how to replace it. So I'm just
Oh,
like, instead of screwing it up, let's just keep it what we're doing.
and you know what? Sometimes that's the best route.
Exactly.
I will say this, at least it sounds like some people have ideas and
Mhm.
aren't just complaining to
Right.
complain, because
Yeah.
how many times I know you probably see it a lot, I see it a lot from my fan base and others.
Mhm.
Let's get rid of something or let's change something, but
Yeah.
there's no real reason why other than, oh,
Right.
I just don't like it.
Yeah. Well, that's not a good enough reason when you're the major money maker sport in the school.
Yep, and especially one that embraces tradition like
Mhm.
no other, and that's one of the
Yeah.
great things about college football, and
Yeah.
partially why I'm doing this podcast, to find out the great things about each school,
Yeah.
that make up the college huddle and around the nation, and so it's really interesting to learn that. Well, maybe it's not to learn, but to see other schools have the same issues of people
Yeah.
just wanting to get rid of
Yeah.
things
Yep.
to do it.
That's a lot of the reason we kinda started up the Boiler Express podcast was, they there was it was around, the end of the Brom era. Probably it would have been the year before they went to the Big Ten title game, I think. And like the fan base was just so grumpy and down in the dumps and like I'm like, dude, we're winning 6, 7, 8 games. Like for Purdue, that's really good. Like that's a generally positive start. Um and like people were just mad to be mad, it seemed like. And we're like, you know what? We're gonna be positive, we're gonna be upbeat, we're gonna be just kind of drive that negativity out of the fan base.
Hmm. Now, that brings me to an interesting question, and I
Mhm.
don't mean this in any way native, and part of it's just I grew up. in
Right.
Florida during the Steve Spurrier and
Uh-huh.
Urban Meyer era, and I remember Ron Zook's 8 and 5 years being considered bad,
Yeah.
bad years, and he got released after 8 and 5
Yeah.
seasons. So, being a fan of Purdue, who's
Mhm.
not known necessarily for the heights of those successes, or at least consistently not
Right.
in those, what is that like being a fan, I guess, since it's such a different perspective?
It can be it's frustrating because a lot of the time sometimes we'll see we'll play tight against or beat teams like the one-off time, the Ohio States or the top, the number 2 ranked Iowa or Michigan State or something like that. And then we come out the next week and we're struggling against Eastern Michigan. I'm like, what are we doing? I mean, like, I think that it's the lack of consistency that I think is the most frustrating, but also at the same time, post Daryl Hazel era and enter in the Brom era and now kind of going into the Ryan Walters era, like there's a lot of excitement because we're getting really good recruits, we're getting capable players and things are good and there's signs of life compared to the abysmal years. Like we were 4-7 going into the Oak and Bucket game and it was a full sold out stadium compared to 10 years ago there were 25,000 people for the same game, and because there's just no excitement. There's a lot of excitement around it now.
And that's good to hear, because for as much as, I'll be honest, in my region, there's a lot of schools we don't really follow or paying attention to. It doesn't mean I
Yeah,
don't want to have the great stories or the great things that come as, part of college football.
yeah,
And speaking of big moments, I think now would be a good time for us to
yeah,
just bring up the 2018 Ohio State game. As a
mhm,
outsider, I think that is one of the biggest things I know Purdue for outside of Drew Brees.
mhm.
What can you tell me about that game and also the storyline it had with Tyler Trent?
Yeah, so that night, I actually had to work my regular, 9 to 5. It was actually a 6 to 6 at that time, but whatever. But there was just, like, it was the whole week leading up to it, like, there was hope that Tyler would be able to make it to the game, and there was just suspense building, and he had some setbacks medically and wasn't sure if he was gonna make it, and then I remember waking up because I work nights, I woke up at, like, 11 so I could watch at least part of game day, and I recorded the first part of it, and they were talking about how, like, the Steve Levy, it almost gives me chills thinking about the Steve Levy, uh, package that they did about Tyler Trent and the struggles and his connection to the football team and all that stuff, and then leading that into that there was news that he was gonna make it and he was coming to the game, and I listened to the game on radio or our local radio, and, like, you could hear the crowd just energize when Tyler Trent entered into the stadium, and it was really interesting. A couple of our guys on the podcast were at that game, and they just said the energy was crazy, and I think Damon from our podcast has mentioned a few times, like, that should be a movie, just how cool and awesome that whole scenario was, and what Tyler really did to bring to light about adolescent cancers and things like that. There was so much more than just a huge upset against a national title contender.
Yeah, and I think that's also just almost storybook as well.
Mhm.
Uh,
It was
talking
just
about
meant to be. Like, it just
right.
felt like there was nothing that was gonna keep that team from beating them, and then to have the end of that game finished off with a pick six by Marcus Bailey, who's from Ohio, that didn't get offered by Ohio State, was just kind of the icing on the cake.
Oh yeah, like I got to watch the ending of that game. I didn't see much of game day that day or know
Yeah,
much of Tyler's story.
yeah.
But then, of course, as the game goes on, they do different interviews or mention him, show him on camera.
Yeah.
and looking into it, is magical. But that second
Mhm.
half, that really
Yeah.
blew it away. So
Yeah.
to not only upset Ohio State, but to win by 29 points
Yeah.
against, a top team. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
that's
just the play calling was genius. It's 3rd and 7 and you run an inside draw that no one is expecting you, and you break it off for a 45-yard touchdown. Like, it was just everything, and I think that was the first and only time that one school had swept all of the player of the week honors, freshman, offensive, defensive, and special teams. It's
yeah,
crazy.
magical
Yeah.
night there in
Yeah.
West Lafayette for sure.
Mhm.
So, for those of you that are listening or watching on YouTube, I encourage you go pull up that game, the 2018 Ohio State Purdue game.
Yep.
It's one that I would say in the last 10 years, it's probably one of
Yeah.
the top 5 stories in
Yeah, there's
college football.
Yeah, because a lot of the big games that we've seen in college football have all been, like, the underdog portion of it. It's never really had that bigger than football part to it, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, and it's a story anyone, whether you're a Purdue fan or someone like me from the SEC or even out west, it's
Yeah.
something we can all relate to and something we can all get behind. So,
Yep. Yeah.
and in a way, that's what college athletics is
Yeah.
about. So
Yep.
definitely a cool story. So let's go ahead and move on to your story and hear
Okay.
about how you became a Purdue fan and
Mhm.
all of that. So, what
Yep.
can you tell me about your Purdue fandom?
Oh, man. So growing up, I was big into basketball and big into football. I got a bit more into football probably, like, when I became 6th and 7th grader, but, like, I really got into it in the year Breeze led Purdue to the Rose Bowl, because there was so much hype. Like, you couldn't watch a TV show without things going crazy, and that just kinda locked me in. So I've kind of been it for my whole life, but it was an organic finding, if that makes sense. But then I went to my first, like, Purdue game in '06, and from there on, I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm hooked. And then I went to Mackey shortly after that, and it was game over. I was done, and it where my wife and I grew up is only about 45 minutes north, and it's just a second home. And my wife went to Purdue, got 2 degrees. I went to Purdue to get a degree, and now we reside in the city. It's a really cool, um, just kind of match made in heaven, if I can say it like that.
Okay, and so at 5 or 6, was it something that you're just flipping through the TV one day and you find them? Were your
It was
parents
honestly
fans?
like a proximity thing. So when I was, like, younger, I was always like, if I'm from Indiana, I gotta choose these schools and blah blah blah. And I was like, Purdue's closer than IU. I'm going with them, and just kind of stuck.
Hey, you know what? And that that works. I mean, it's amazing to hear doing, doing why we huddle, how
Mhm.
different people became fans, like you're talking about, hey, I'm from Indiana. I'm going to find an Indiana team I can support.
Yeah,
And for you, it's like, here it's closer, where
yeah,
some people may be like, I prefer black and gold, or,
yeah.
you have,
I like
sto-
leprechauns or something. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, Virginia Tech, we're talking to them. One of them was like, I really liked watching Michael Vick and
yeah,
K State. They had
yeah,
run of the gambit
yeah,
from, hey, it's been my family for years, to I just went to school there and I became a
yeah,
fan. So it's
yeah.
always interesting hearing. I think you might be the first of, it was all about proximity, and I like
Proximity. Yeah,
proximity versus the other in-state school.
yeah,
So
yeah. I don't know. It just kind of it stuck, and whatever 7-year-old me thought was a good idea decided that was a good idea.
So, with Purdue,
Mhm.
what are some of your personal favorite memories related to like Purdue football? And that
Ooh,
can be on the field, off the field, maybe a little bit of both.
yeah. Man, that's tough. I mean, obviously, one of the big ones for me was the first time I went to a Purdue game, being able to have that experience and kind of really, I want to say, solidify my passion for Purdue, but it certainly is up there. And then just like some of the upsets over the years. I mean, really that run in the like I remember the Holy Toledo game like it was yesterday because I remember watching it. I was, knee high to a grasshopper, but I knew that I still remember that game and the radio call and the TV call and everything. Like and that just the chills kind of being like, wow, like I get like goosebumps from this. Like that really locked me into that the Purdue fandom. And then probably one of my most cherished Purdue moments was actually a couple years ago, when Purdue beat Michigan State when they were number 3, because I had never had an opportunity. I'd always been close to having opportunities to go to those games, but work or class or this or that, it never really worked out. And then I was able to go that year and just being a part of that whole Purdue fandom during another upset of Spoilermakers, was pretty fun to be a part of.
Awesome. And for those of us not in the know, what is
Mm.
the Holy Toledo game?
So the Holy Toledo game, trying to condense like 5 minutes of game time down. So Drew Brees had thrown, I want to say 4 interceptions throughout the game, or 3 interceptions throughout the game. Purdue's down, I'm going to say 2 with like 5 minutes left, and Brees drops back, throws, and it gets picked off. And I think it was Mike Doss who picked it off. He's running back, going, and Drew hits him out of bounds. And in an interview 20 years later, Drew said that he was trying to hit him so hard so he'd knock himself out of the game because he was so mad at himself. Well, they go into score, I think, or something, and then Purdue ends up marching down, and they get to, I'd say, probably 35-40 yard line, and it's a play where the slot receiver on the right side is Seth Morales, and he's a transfer from Butler University, a walk-on transfer. I believe he's a walk-on transfer. He gets the ball on this play like 0.01% of the time. But Drew happened to look, and then he saw Seth just streaking down the middle, and he just throws the ball as high and as hard as he can, and it drops right into Seth Morales's um, mitts, and he walks in for a touchdown. And the Holy Toledo portion of it is when I believe it was Brent Musburger goes, Seth Morales, Holy Toledo, like basically trying to edit himself from saying a lot of other holy something.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of the fan base was saying holy something else because it was kind of mind boggling. The last 6 minutes of that game is probably some of the most entertaining I've seen it from Purdue football.
And that was early 2000s against
Yeah,
Ohio State.
yeah, this was the 99 season because this was the Rose Bowl team. So 99 to play in the 2000 Rose Bowl. Um, yeah, so that was all that team, and it was a lot of like ups and downs, and Purdue ends up winning a three-way tie between Purdue and Michigan and Ohio State to get to the Rose Bowl. This was a game that if Purdue loses, they're crap out of luck. They're not going to make it to a Rose Bowl, and this was the best chance they've had to go to a Rose Bowl since 1967. And so it was there's so much writing on it. I think a lot of people remember that play just because it was so impactful to go on throughout the season, you know. It's those 1 or 2 plays a season that can really change the dynamic of how it goes.
For sure. And I've got to ask, did Morales ever become a big player for you guys, or was this like his crowning moment?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember. He was always like a very solid, like, utility player. Like, he was like, if you needed somebody with hands, he was the guy to go to. But a lot of what Purdue did during that time was basketball on grass because it was the old basically Joe Tiller, who was the coach at the time, was kind of innovative in the Big Ten because it was all like I formations, power formations, running the football, and Purdue comes in and puts 4 wide receivers out there running bubble screens, tunnel screens, deep passes, quick plays. I think it was that game. Drew threw the ball for like 55 times or something like that. Like just some unheard of stuff for late 90s, early 2000s Big Ten football. Like it was astronomical.
And yeah, I would say because even in the mid 2000s, you know, for some of us, the
Yeah.
stereotype of the Big Ten was, like you said, I formation,
Yeah.
pound the football, three
Yep.
yards in a cloud of dust,
Yeah.
all of those. So, if you could say who is your favorite player in Purdue history?
Oof. So the common answer is usually um like Drew Brees, right? Like that's
Right.
kind of the standard. I think one of my favorites is probably Stu Schweigert, who played during that same kind of era. He was just after the Drew Brees era. I believe he was a senior in '04, but he was Bob Sanders before Bob Sanders was Bob Sanders. Like headhunter, man on a mission. He's like the 34th ranked athlete out of in the country, out of state of Michigan. Super like I when I played football at those younger ages, I always wanted to emulate how he played because it was reckless abandon, and he ended up he's a Purdue Hall of Famer. He went to the National Football League, played for the Raiders for a dozen or so years, and he's a super awesome dude. Like I know him personally, he's a super good dude, but he was a wrecking ball on the field.
Have you told him that when you were younger, you tried to emulate him, and he
Yeah,
was like
yeah,
that guy?
he was like, "No, concussion's bad, stop."
But oh,
Yeah,
but that's
he
cool.
was super awesome, it was just there was something about him kinda streaking across the field and just ripping a football out of a dude's hands bit because, like, so many people, I think, underestimated his speed a little bit, but he also backed up that speed with just hitting like a dump truck.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that there are exceptions to the
Yeah.
never meet your heroes.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
he's a really good dude. I chat with him every so often. He's super awesome dude.
cool, cool, cool. Now, what, if I may ask,
Mhm.
and maybe you've already answered this describing some of these, but what is your favorite game for Purdue? Is it that Holy Toledo game, or do you have a
Yeah,
different favorite?
I would say it was my favorite at the time, and it probably still is my favorite because that one play, the entire season hinged on that one play. Like, it could have if Morales drops the ball and we don't score, we don't make it to a Rose Bowl, and it's kind of they keep playing the what if game for the rest of forever, right?
Right.
I think that's probably it. I'd probably say a close second is even though we got beat, would probably be the Big Ten title game because it was like it was another step in the progression under Jeff Brom to be like, listen, we've won the West, we've done it for a first time, and just seeing the emotion on like the team's face and the coaches have all the work that had been put into the highs and lows to see it finally um, get expressed in the culmination of the Big Ten title game. And like I said, even though we lost, it was still super exciting.
For sure. Now, for the future, like
Uh-huh.
whether it's a just personal thing you want to see, or
Mhm.
whether it's uh, how can I say this? Um, what is a future thing you hope to experience as part of being a Purdue fan? And whether it's something like, I want to see us make it back to a Big Ten title game, or
Mhm.
whether it's, hey, I can't wait to take my kid to the stadium for the first time.
Yeah.
What,
So, oh, sorry.
oh no, I was going to say,
Yeah.
what's your,
Yeah. So
uh,
I think and everybody will be like, oh, that's stereotypical. But I just had a set of twins and one of them's a son. And I look, and like with my daughters as well, like I've taken my daughter to spring games and she's been to one Purdue game already, but like having that like dad moment with the son to go to to a Purdue football game, something that I'm so passionate about, is super exciting for me. And the thought of that is, and building those memories, as well as building those memories with all my kids. But there's always that like that father son kind of story about going to football games or basketball games and stuff, and sharing those hobbies with him and with all my kids. I think that's super exciting. But I would love to see Purdue get back to the Big Ten title game. It's just going to be really hard because they've gotten rid of the divisions and now it's top two teams. So it becomes very difficult for a school like Purdue that doesn't have those, and especially when you add in Oregon and Washington and USC, those are three more teams on top of everybody else that are vying for, you've got the Michigan States, the Penn States, Ohio State, Michigan. It becomes a log jam up there. So while I hope for that, I almost want to say that a more likely possibility is Purdue sneaks into a 12-team Big Ten play or college football playoff, because we see a lot of these teams who aren't able to get to their Big Ten title game or to a conference title game, that under a 12-team format, they'd be able to get in because they are the 12th best team in the country. I'll take it. I don't care if I'm the 12th best team in the country. Just let me be part of the CFP.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
I think national titles, when we're talking about national titles, I think the expectation is more on basketball, especially within recent years. But when it comes to football, I think Purdue can get there. It's just going to be a project because we were left, frankly speaking, pretty bare cupboard from the Daryl Hazel era. So there's a lot of recruiting and building, and luckily we have the transfer portal now that we're able to go and pick up some stuff to fill some needs when they come about. But yeah, I think I'd love to see, even like I said, even if it's the 12th team in the CFP, nobody can take that away.
For sure. And you never know what can happen.
Yeah.
Like as you see in March Madness. Now, do I think we're going to see as many upsets as you see in March Madness?
No.
No. But at the same time, you never know. Let's say
Right.
you're that
That's why they
12
play the
seed.
game.
Yeah. You're that 12 seed. Maybe you beat that 5 seed,
Uh-huh.
the first round, and you never know what can
It's all
happen there.
momentum. Just like in a game, in a playoff stretch like that, it's all about momentum.
For sure. Um, Now, let's go ahead and get into the Boiler Express podcast. I know you talked a little bit about
Mhm.
why you started it earlier, but what can you tell those listening about the podcast and why should they check you guys out?
So we are just five knuckleheads who had a really big passion for Purdue sports, and we just got tired of some of the negativity, including from, not that they're around anymore, but there's just some like really negative articles and things coming out from Purdue sponsored websites, like not sponsored, but Purdue affiliated websites. And we're just like, we got to do something different. So we put our heads together, and almost 3 years ago now, we're like, hey, we're gonna kick this off and see what happens, and try and minimize the monetary risk that we're gonna take. And if it takes off, great. And if not, we'll just go back to complaining in our group chat.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And hopefully you've seen growth over those 3 years, which I
Oh,
assume you have.
100%. Yeah, 100%. We've had a lot of really awesome opportunities to be able to connect, especially now with the College Huddle. I've been fortunate enough that the College Huddle's kind of trusted us with developing a little bit of a different aspect when it comes to fan participation. So we've got 5 Discord channels, which Discord is like a message board on steroids, is the way I like to put it. But College Huddle has one that's kind of all the fan bases put into one area, and then each major conference has one in the group of fives in the College Huddle as well, and the Pac 2 or 12 or whatever they're calling themselves now, um, is also in the main College Huddle Discord. But yeah, we're trying to get people over there. My goal of it is to try and make it kind of like a free version on 3 or Rivals, right? Like make it to where fans can chit chat, get some like exclusive information, so to speak. and chat with other fans of their team, but also talk to fans of other teams and just kind of spitball around and get information and share information and razz each other like we do.
Right. And no reason we can't do that without w- sorry, no reason we can do that and not be, messed up,
Right.
towards each
Yeah.
other. Because
Yeah,
sometimes on
because
Twitter,
that's always the big thing is like X, Twitter, whatever it's called now, is so because like if one dude says something wrong, it's like 700 people go in at him. And I'm like, okay, this makes it a little bit more there's a little bit more rules to it. Not rules, but like things can be moderated a little bit easier.
right. Yeah. And trust me, I've seen that. Heck, anytime I'm quote tweeted, whether it's on the podcast
Oh
page
yeah.
or on others, it's like, oh no,
Yeah, what happened?
is this going to be good or not? And it's like,
Right?
I simply replied to this one person about this one thing. And all of a sudden, now I've got 10,000 views on
Yeah.
what I thought was an innocuous tweet. And now I'm
Yeah.
being
Now,
asked about why don't you like that we're sharing mug shots of players who didn't commit to us? It's like, well, because I think that's a little dirty.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
but
and that's a little bit of it too. Is the negativity of fan base sometimes was what we went into, but at the same time, like emphasizing the positive aspects of the fan
right,
base, because our fan base, and it's like every fan base, right? Like kid doesn't commit, you're asking a 17-year-old to make a decision that's going to affect him for the rest of his life.
right,
Like at the end of the day, leave the kid alone. But there's also times when I've gone in there and seen other Purdue accounts who's like, "Hey, man, thanks for thinking of us. Like, good luck in the future," or something like that. Like, it's both ways, but it seems like the mouthy ones get amplified more for sure.
right. And to throw on this, and I throw on these episodes, I'm sure that the people who have listened to several of these hear me say, I don't get to talk about Florida much because I'm always doing the interviewing.
Yeah.
But a story that I've shared in the past was I went to a New York Knicks game in Madison Square Garden. It was Christmas of 2010. And there's a dad and his son next to me, and they're playing the Bulls. And I forget exactly what player it was, but there was a former Knick player on the Bulls.
Hmm.
And the dad says to the son, "You clap for him because he wore our jersey, played well for
Yeah.
us, and you respect him."
Yeah.
And I don't know why with most transfers or kids that don't commit to the school, we can't just have a,
Right.
good luck in your future feeling.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's always been the irritating thing with me too. Is like unless they transfer within the conference, I'm like, okay, this sucks. I don't because like Purdue's always had bad luck of like if somebody chooses a school within the Big Ten, they usually go bananas and just it's a problem. But yeah, like I know it's basketball, but like Mason Gillis going to Duke, super excited because Duke is a national powerhouse every year, and it should be a compliment that one of our guys gets picked up by a team like that.
right. And even in conference,
Right.
I think there's a line and
Yeah.
like, be gone without without some of the nonsense that
Oh
you
yeah.
do see.
Yeah. People hoping for injuries and stuff. Like, really? That's what we're doing right now?
Yeah. But with that said, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole in the
Yeah.
black hole that is
Yeah.
since we've talked about Discord, the black hole that X can be. But for
Yeah.
sure, I'd say one thing about doing this podcast and the College Huddle is it has opened plenty of avenues to
Mhm.
just talk to people and see, hey, the good, the bad,
Yeah.
all that is everywhere, and seeing what we have in common and seeing the things we don't that are interesting
Yeah.
perspectives, like from Florida, who hopes has a stated goal of being a contender for conference and national championships every year. Hopefully we get back to that. We've not been that for a while. And
Right.
then hearing, like you said, Purdue, you're like, hey, there are so many teams now it'd be great to be in Big Ten. I just don't see it necessarily happening too much. But get me to number 12.
Yeah, I'd
It's
be
been interesting to hear those perspectives.
yeah, for sure.
And I think the Discord that you've pretty much created for the College Huddle, which people need to check out,
Yeah,
I think that will allow people to see those. And I think hearing perspectives like that do maybe cool down at
yeah.
least, the
Yeah, when
temperature.
people get shoehorned in their little corners, they kind of forget that like some people, have had fans of some fan bases, the bigger ones, like, "Oh, you'll never win a national title." That may be true, but you're never gonna win a national title in basketball, and we might. Like that's
Right.
it's just the different places that are um each fan base and each team. Like expectations for Florida are different than Purdue, than different than USC and Texas. It just is what it
Right.
is.
And definitely getting to talk to some groups I've talked to, Kansas State,
Yeah.
Washington, Virginia Tech, seeing
Yeah.
all that and seeing, and of course now Purdue,
Yeah.
and FIU, and
Yeah.
I'm about to leave out Mississippi State, and I'm sure, and Boise State. I think
Yeah.
I've hit everyone
I
now.
think you hit everyone.
Yeah, I was like, hold on, I'm listing more. Let me see if I can get them
Yeah.
all
Right.
as we're continuing to do these. But no, I think the more, as in general, not just college football, but I think the more we can talk to each other as a society, it makes things
Yeah.
better. But especially in college football, something that unites, so many people, and that they love this game. If
Yeah.
we can just, get on a Discord or
Yeah.
X or whatever, and
Yeah.
just, have the fun
Chat.
razzing,
Yeah.
chat, and
Yeah.
maybe have fun razzing. I mean, I've dropped Tennessee jokes on here, so if Michael ever watches one of these,
Yeah.
uh, he can call me out on it
Yeah. Don't
next
get
time I'm
started. Don't get Purdue and Tennessee fans started because we're building an unofficial rivalry between these two fan bases.
there. You go. Yeah, next time I'm on the SEC podcast with Michael, he might have heard
He's
this.
going to have some opinions.
Yeah.
And they're probably strong. If he tries to tell you that they scored a touchdown on the last thing of the Music City Bowl, he's full of crap and needs to read the rule book. Just saying. Just just saying.
I'm just saying I'm on take your word for it. As a Florida fan, I will trust the Purdue fan
Yeah.
in the room
Well, I
on that.
appreciate that.
So, all right. Where can we find you on social media? Where can we find the podcast?
So podcast is on all of your usual um sites like Apple, Spotify, LinkedIn or whatever. I don't know. They're like all of them that are available are available. And then on Twitter, we usually the way we usually kind of do it is we will go live. So the guys are actually going to go live here in about 6 minutes. Um, and talk about stuff on Twitter. It'll be at Boiler Express with a little underscore, I guess is what the kids call it. And then we're on YouTube and Facebook, which we also multi-stream to there as well. And then usually a day or so later, the show will be up on the podcast.
Okay, perfect. And if you had one last, or scratch that, if you could describe the culture of Purdue in one word, what would you say that word is?
Lunch pail.
Okay.
It's not flashy. It's not crazy, but it's very much like the hard hat lunch pail mentality. Like the a lot of the kids that come through the football program and the basketball program are all very like squared away, know their role, do what they're supposed to, and you just don't see the big issues or big craziness that comes out of West Lafayette like you do see at other programs. So I would say lunch pail. That's kind of the best way I can kind of describe it.
I've heard a whole lot of different things so far. Lunch pail might be the
Yeah.
most unique, and
Yeah.
I do like that. I do like that.
No.
Yeah. So
Good.
we'll go ahead and get out of here. For everyone that has taken the time to listen, Thank you. Be sure to check out our other episodes of Why We Huddle and check out the other podcasts in the College Huddle network. Be sure to check out the Boiler Express as well. I'm Daniel, and to be honest, thank you for joining us and discovering Why We Huddle.